Welcome back to Sip and Talk.
Oh boy, another one of those topics that makes you go,
Totally. So today, we're getting into something pretty fascinating and really layered. It's this whole dynamic between how a place is seen by the rest of the world versus, how it sees itself.
especially when it's facing some really unique kinds of pressure.
Exactly. We're looking specifically at Taiwan today. We've got some interesting angles, like these surprising ideas some Europeans might have, a really pointed take from a British politician.
And then we'll dig into the challenges Taiwanese people themselves face, right?
Yeah.
Identity, confidence, and how they're, pushing back and building themselves up.
Yeah, trying to pull the key insights from all these viewpoints together for you to get a clearer picture of what's going on.
It's such an interesting mix, isn't it? You've got these huge external things shaping how people see Taiwan, pushing on it.
Uh-huh.
And at the same time, this really strong internal process of figuring out identity, just growing organically within Taiwan, how those two things interact. That's the core of it, really.
Totally. And maybe one of the most surprising outside views we came across is this idea that some people in Europe might still picture Taiwan as mostly rural.
You mean like fields everywhere, rice paddies, straw hats, that sort of thing?
Yeah, exactly that image.
It does sound like something straight out of, the 1960s or 70s. But yeah, apparently for some, that old picture hasn't really faded.
Okay, so let's unpack that. How is that even possible today? I mean, Taiwan's a tech giant, a massive global player.
Right. Well, there are a few things feeding into what you might call this perception lag. First off, history matters.
Okay.
Taiwan did have a big agricultural phase, deep into the 20th century.
Mm-hmm.
And those images, maybe from old films or books, they got stuck.
Got a mental snapshot that never got updated.
Pretty much. And if you haven't really engaged with Taiwan since then, maybe that's the image you're left with. Then add the international media focus, especially from, say, Europe. What do you usually hear about Taiwan?
It's almost always the geopolitical stuff, the tension with China.
Exactly. Cross-strait tensions, military drills, diplomatic fights, which is, of course, important news. But
it crowds out everything else, like the modern cities, the tech industry, just normal life.
it can, yeah.
Yeah.
It frames Taiwan through this very specific, very dramatic lens of conflict. You get the political headlines, but maybe not the stories about, Taipei's innovation hubs or the sheer scale of its economy.
Right, less about the day-to-day reality.
And maybe, just maybe, there are some old, lingering stereotypes about East Asia in general that kind of reinforce those traditional farming images. It's just fascinating how stubborn these old mental pictures can be.
The gap is just huge when you think about it. Taiwan's not just a player, it's absolutely critical globally. Semiconductors are.
Oh, completely indispensable. TSMC alone is foundational to so much modern technology. It's a super advanced, highly developed economy, miles away from just farms.
That disconnect in awareness is really something.
It really is.
Okay, speaking of being critical and these disconnects, let's talk about this unique pressure Taiwan is under. Someone described it as like an original sin, this constant international push, the narrative that it's not a country.
Yeah, that's a really deep, constant challenge. I mean, you have this place that functions like any other democracy, government, elections, courts, the whole thing. But it lives under the shadow, primarily from China, saying, nope, you're not a real state, and actively trying to shut it out of the world stage.
And that's not just like political theory in a book. It hits hard in the real world, doesn't it?
Oh, absolutely. China works really hard to block Taiwan from joining international groups. The World Health Organization is the classic example, but others too, UN bodies.
And they use history to do it. You mentioned UN Resolution 2758.
Yeah, that's the one they often lean on. It's from 1971.
Remind us, what did that resolution actually decide?
Well, the analysis we looked at explains it pretty clearly. It was about one specific question back then. Who gets the China seat at the UN?
Right. Was it Beijing, the PRC, or Taipei, the ROC, which had held it up till then?
Exactly. And the UN voted to give the seat to the PRC government in Beijing. That was the point of the resolution, settling the representation issue within the UN.
Okay. So how does that get twisted to use against Taiwan today?
Well, China's interpretation, which they push really hard globally, is that this resolution means Taiwan is part of the PRC, and therefore Beijing represents Taiwan. And then they use that argument to say Taiwan can't join international bodies, because that would somehow imply it's a separate country.
So a 50-year-old decision about a UN seat is being stretched to challenge Taiwan's basic status now.
That's the argument, yeah. And think about the impact on people living there. Imagine constantly being told your country isn't real, being excluded just because of politics. It's got to be tough.
Yeah, a psychological burden.
Definitely. It chips away at your sense of identity, your place in the world, your collective confidence. You're living in a free, working democracy, but powerful forces are constantly saying it doesn't or shouldn't exist.
And that's something most other democracies just don't have to deal with.
Not in the same way, no. Think about, I don't know, Canada or Japan. Their actual statehood isn't questioned daily on the world stage.
Right.
Now, the situation's unique, but that dynamic, a smaller place facing pressure from a bigger power, we've seen that before, historically.
Yeah, mention comparisons.
Yeah, like maybe Estonia or Ukraine, facing historical pressure from Russia. They built their national confidence through internal unity, really emphasizing their distinct identity, even when facing huge external denial or control.
So that external denial almost forces a stronger internal definition of self.
It seems like it, yeah. Becomes necessary.
That makes sense. Okay, let's pivot slightly. We looked at a specific view from outside a British member of parliament. He had quite a bit to say about Taiwan.
He did. Very passionate, clearly holds Taiwan in high regard. Love the people, the culture, the food.
Standard stuff for visitors.
Duh. But he really zeroed in on Taiwan's democracy. Called it one of the most vibrant, one of the strongest he's seen anywhere.
And he wasn't just admiring it passively, right? He talked about its contribution.
Yes, exactly. He made the point that Taiwan's democracy actively helps the world, sharing its know-how, even when it's excluded. The big example was COVID-19.
Ah, right. Their early success was incredible.
Phenomenal. Really low case numbers early on. Despite being locked out of the WHO, he saw that as proof of their public health strength.
It's such a frustrating irony, isn't it? Having that knowledge but being blocked from the main global health forum.
Totally. He also mentioned their leadership in tech, obviously, but also clean energy, working towards net zero. His whole point was, look, this place is a major positive contributor, despite the political obstacles.
Okay, but here's where he got really sharp, right? Challenging that UN Resolution 2758 argument.
Yeah, he went right at it, dug into the history of that 71 vote. And his argument basically was that resolution did one thing.
Which was?
Decide who gets the China seat at the UN, PRC in, ROC out. Full stop.
And what did he say it absolutely didn't do?
Crucially, he argued, it says nothing about Taiwan itself. It doesn't say Taiwan is part of the PRC. And it gives the PRC zero right to represent Taiwan, either in the UN or anywhere else.
What about the one China principle that China always talks about?
He was really clear on that. He said, look at the text of 2758. There's nothing in there establishing the one China principle as international law. So using that resolution to deny Taiwan's status or block it internationally, he called that interpretation totally unfounded.
So in his view, China's using this resolution strategically.
Exactly. He framed it as one of China's gray zone tactics,
Yeah.
Creating ambiguity, pushing interpretations, trying to wear down Taiwan's sovereignty bit by bit without firing a shot.
And he was worried about how the world was reacting or not reacting?
Yeah, he expressed real concern about the sort of international silence or lack of strong pushback against China's increasing military actions around Taiwan.
The airspace incursions, the ships, the Coast Guard stuff.
All of that. He worried that silence might look like acceptance to Beijing. He really hammered the point that China has no legitimate sovereign claim under international law, and the world needs to contest any attempt to build some kind of fake legal justification for aggression.
And the stakes are huge, he said.
Massive. He cited that estimated conflict could cost the global economy something like $10 trillion. That's like 10% of global GDP. Makes other conflicts, economically speaking, look small. So stability there isn't just about Taiwan. It's a global economic imperative in his view.
Wow. That's a really strong case for paying attention. Okay, let's shift focus now. Look inside Taiwan. With all this pressure, this identity questioning, why do some people from Taiwan seem to align with Beijing or support its positions?
Yeah, this is obviously a really sensitive topic there. And motivations can be mixed, but the analysis generally points to one main driver.
Let me guess. Money. The market.
Bingo. It's largely pragmatic and economic. If you're an entertainer, a business owner, a social media star, the sheer size of the mainland Chinese market is just enormous.
Right. Opportunities you just don't get in Taiwan.
Exactly. We're talking huge concert tours, massive endorsement deals, film roles, incredible reach online. That potential income is just on a different scale.
But it's not just a carrot. There's a stick, too, right? Pressure.
Oh, absolutely. If you want to operate in that market, there's often an expectation, sometimes subtle, sometimes not, that you'll publicly toe Beijing's line, especially on the One China stuff.
And if you don't?
You risk getting blacklisted, losing deals, maybe even getting canceled. So that threat creates this powerful incentive to, well, lean in proactively, make supportive statements just to keep your career going.
And conversely, if you do align, maybe you get rewarded.
Sometimes, yeah. Maybe preferential treatment, positive coverage in state media.
Yeah.
It becomes this really difficult calculation for some people.
Balancing identity, maybe personal beliefs against just making a living, basically.
For many, it seems that's the core tension. But it's important to say it might not always be just about the money, though that's often the main lens.
What else could be factors?
Well, some might have genuine family ties, cultural connections to the mainland. Maybe they grew up with older historical narratives emphasizing a shared Chinese identity before things shifted.
Okay.
Or, maybe some are genuinely disillusioned with politics in Taiwan itself and are looking for something different. It's complex.
And we see this play out with public figures sometimes, right? They become symbols of this whole debate.
Definitely. When certain celebrities or business figures make pro-Beijing statements or identify as Chinese, it really sparks intense discussion in Taiwan about, motivations, loyalty, what it means to be Taiwanese today, especially under this kind of external influence.
It's clearly a tough dynamic. So, switching gears again. How does a society facing all this actually build up its confidence? How do they foster that resilience from the inside?
Yeah, it's not easy, but the consensus points towards a whole range of strategies. It's about strengthening who they are internally and then finding smart ways to project that outwards, defining themselves, basically.
So what's the foundation?
Building that strong internal identity is job one. That means things like education focusing on Taiwan's own history, which is very distinct from China's, celebrating its diverse languages, not just Mandarin, but Taiwanese Hokkien, Hakka, the indigenous languages, really fostering pride in its unique, evolving culture.
Owning their own story.
Exactly. And the polling shows this is happening. Way more people identify primarily as Taiwanese now than, say, 20 or 30 years ago.
Okay, so strengthen the core. What else?
Boost international visibility. Find ways to make a mark globally, even without formal diplomatic ties.
How do they do that?
Well, economic clout is huge. Think TSMC, you simply can't ignore Taiwan economically. Then there's cultural power, exporting films, music, pop culture that finds fans abroad.
Right.
Participating in sports, even under names like Chinese Taipei, keeps them present. And providing humanitarian aid around the world that shows Taiwan acting like a responsible global citizen, regardless of the politics.
It's like diplomacy by other means. Soft power.
Precisely. Showing the world what Taiwan is and what it does directly. Another key thing is actually turning that external pressure into a source of strength.
How does that work?
Well, facing a common threat can actually unite people. And highlighting Taiwan's real achievements, especially its democracy, which consistently ranks super high globally by groups like Freedom House, that becomes a source of collective pride, something to rally around. Remember the sunflower movement back in 2014?
Yeah, protesting that trade deal with China.
That's often seen as a prime example. External pressure leading to internal action, reinforcing that distinct Taiwanese identity and democratic values, using the challenge as a unifier.
Makes sense. What else?
Providing support internally is also mentioned. Recognizing that living under this constant non-state narrative takes a toll psychologically, so offering mental health support, creating spaces for open discussion about identity and these pressures, helping people process it all.
And getting young people involved.
Absolutely vital. Empowering young Taiwanese to use digital tools, social media, YouTube, you name it, to share their own stories, their daily lives, their culture directly with the world. It bypasses old gatekeepers and shows an authentic, modern Taiwan. Supporting their creative industries helps too.
And lastly, being watchful internally.
Yeah, staying vigilant against that external influence we talked about. That means boosting media literacy, helping people spot disinformation, especially stuff aimed at undermining democracy or sowing division. It means openly discussing the affiliations or motivations of public figures who seem aligned with Beijing, strengthening Taiwan's own cultural scene so it's less reliant on the mainland market. And maybe even legal discussions around things like dual citizenship for public figures if it creates conflicts with national identity or security.
Wow, that's a lot. It's really comprehensive. Culture, economy, tech, politics, psychology.
It's definitely not passive. It's a proactive, multi-level effort to shore up identity, build on strengths, and engage the world creatively, all while handling these really unique pressures.
So, to kind of wrap it all up, we've gone from these sometimes really outdated outside views of Taiwan through the intense international pressures it navigates daily, looked at the complex reasons why some individuals might align differently, and ended up seeing all these ways Taiwanese people are actively building resilience, defining their own identity, and finding strength from within.
Yeah, it's a powerful story of a society really working to define itself and thrive, even when its basic existence is constantly being challenged.
It really highlights that connection between how a nation feels about itself internally and how it deals with the outside world.
Absolutely.
So maybe here's something for you, the listener, to think about. In a world where so many places are grappling with identity, influence, big power dynamics, what can we learn from Taiwan's experience? What does it tell us about that link between outside recognition, internal unity, and just a people's basic sense of self-worth? How does a society keep its spirit, its purpose, when the world, or parts of it, keep questioning whether it should even exist?
Definitely something to mull over. I just want to give another shout out to Micky from Micky to Life. His channel is a treasure trove of inspiration, and he's a huge Sip&Talk fan.
Absolutely. Make sure to check him out and maybe even share your awesome podcast intro with him once you've created it.